Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters. Today we're talking about the new moon forecast for Aquarius of 2025. And my astrology star sister and friend that's joining me today is Madam Simon. Welcome, Simon. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you, Liz?
Staying warm. I've got the fireplace going because it's been really cold at night. Hope you're staying warm.
Yeah, better than I was this morning. It was really cold here. So,
Okay, Madam Simon's website is iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And reach out to us if you have any questions. So, some new moon suggestions are of what you can do during the new moon or after the new moon. I like to wait until about a day or so after when we see the first sliver of the moonlight to kind of activate our new moon wishes, desires, intentions. Um, and it's a supportive time to work on all those. I like to write down what needs to be released or what I think could be released to make room for the new wishes and desires or intentions, and to burn it in a safe container or rip it into little pieces and release it. And then start writing down my intentions and desires. And after I've done that, and you can take a couple of days to do work on that. It doesn't have to just be, hurry up in 10 minutes. And then light a candle to initiate that and be as specific as possible. Have 3 to 5 intentions or desires, and we can always combine wishes and desires. Do you have anything to add to that, Simon?
well, I like to think of the darkness of the new moon as being an incubator time. You kind of sit there in that darkness and let things kind of percolate in terms of your intentions for the month ahead, so that you're not actually setting your intentions on the date of the new moon. Like Liz said, you were waiting for that first sliver of the crescent moon, that first sliver of light. And that's when you start to actually to really set those intentions down. But the darker the moon is that kind of fertile waiting period.
Yes, I like to use that dark of the moon time to write down what I want to release or if I need help to release something. So that's very helpful. Okay, so it's also Lunar New Year, the year of um, the wood snake, on January 29th at 4:36 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that's 7:36 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can adjust that to your location. And we're using the chart for Seattle. And it's in Aquarius, so that's a fixed sign, and fixed energy endures and maintains. It's mid-season between winter and spring. It's an air sign that's adaptable, communicative, and logical. And its modern ruler is Uranus, and its traditional ruler is Saturn. And the new moon is always about new beginnings, creativity, and a time to initiate. And the Sabian symbol keyword is self revaluation. And I was reflecting on that, and I thought that that was a nice theme to add to the new moon to do some self revaluation. Would you like to add anything to that, Simon?
Yeah, that word revaluation, um, as opposed to evaluating oneself. Instead, this is revaluation, as in um, reestablishing your sense of your own value. Um, and I think that's really interesting in the context of Aquarius, because Aquarius is group oriented. It's the opposite sign from Leo, which is ruled by the sun and is associated with individual creative expression. And so, these signs are on an axis. They're not operating in a vacuum. They're operating together on some level. And so when we are looking at the needs of the group, we can certainly do these things where we're kind of assessing ourselves and judging ourselves, and that's not really helpful. Instead, having a sense of our own value that we bring to the group, I think is a more helpful way for us to look at this, so that we're doing actually the Leo work of creative expression, but we're now bringing it to the group. We are combining it with the efforts and the creative expression of others, so that we can all move forward together.
Thank you. So, Aquarius, the mantra is I know, and some keywords are abstract, analytical, intelligent, dispassionate, visionary, big picture, utopian, and innovative. And would you like to cover the cautions?
Oh, argumentative, emotionless, antisocial, rebellious, detached. I would add dissociative. They're in terms of both the traditional rulership of Saturn and the modern rulership or affiliation of Uranus, there can be associations with traumatic experiences, and so there can then be that desire to kind of pull back a bit from the group. It's something that I find interesting when we look at different cultures and particularly people who are used to living in maybe urban environments with lots of people versus people who are used to living in rural environments without a lot of people. There will be different levels of engagement. If you're constantly surrounded by people, there comes this point where you kind of have to somehow negotiate your own space. And for a lot of urban dwellers, that can involve pulling back from other people. So I find that interesting in how that's reflected in the Aquarian archetype.
And now we're going to go on to the out of bounds planets. Out of the bounds of the sun, and the declination would exceed 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south. And they act on their own and act out of character. So the moon will be out of bounds from January 24th through the 29th. And Mars went out of bounds on January 1st and will be out of bounds until April 7th. Anything you'd like to add about out of bounds?
No, I think pretty much covers it.
And then for those that an aspect key would be helpful, there's one here. And so here's the chart for the Aquarius new moon and lunar new year on January 29th. The moon's at 9 degrees Aquarius in 51 minutes. And that moon is conjunct the sun, always on a new moon. But it's also conjunct Mercury and Pluto, which the moon was conjunct Pluto and Mercury hours, probably about 10 hours before the exact new moon. So it's, even though it's a little bit of a wide conjunction, it still made contact with those other planets. So, they're housemates or companions in the same spot. So what would you like to add about that big conjunction?
Right. So, the moon being the fastest traveling of that body out of that bunch, it's almost like it's carrying forward the light from those previous conjunctions. There's this translation of light that is going on there, so that the moon experiences the conjunction with Pluto and the conjunction with Mercury, which are fairly tight, and then brings that to the sun, like kind of like it's relaying messages from the other planets.
Thank you for that. And then here we have some aspects to that new moon. We have a trine with Jupiter in Gemini and a square with Vesta in Scorpio. Would you like to talk about those?
Okay, so I actually want to kind of tie together some things about this. So the moon bringing forward the influence of Pluto and Mercury, and then trine Jupiter in a Mercury ruled sign, and already being in Aquarius, which is a sign associated with logic, right? Even though it's the moon's, emotional and intuitive and instinctive, but it's in this very logical sign. So we've got a lot of emphasis on thought and communication and information, and how are we processing information on both conscious and unconscious levels. And yet, this moon is square to Vesta in Scorpio. And Scorpio is it's the sign of the moon's detriment. Okay. And it's a sign that is ruled by Mars, who is currently retrograde, in the moon's home sign, which is Mars' sign of fall. So, and then Jupiter is in Mercury's home sign, but it's Jupiter's detriment, is the sign of Gemini. And so we've got multiple bodies that are being influenced by this, not in a very comfortable place. And yet Jupiter, who's big and enthusiastic, I mean, a trine to Jupiter is generally a nice thing. Jupiter's trying to make us, have a good time and be hopeful and optimistic and all of that. But in a space of communication and information, big data, which of course has been a signature of Jupiter's time in Gemini, and combined with Pluto in Aquarius, we've seen this rise of AI, which I think is influenced by both of those transits. We've also seen, the rise of misinformation. So when you've got Mercury conjoining Pluto, there has been this, perhaps a sense of what is rotten in terms of our communication. Where are we propagating ideas that are perhaps not healthy for us as a society? Where are people twisting the truth, or simply engaged in outright lies? With Pluto involved, of course, there's also, overtones of wealth and power, but also what is ripe for transformation, what is overripe, what is really, needs some purification, needs to be radically changed. And so when Mercury's conjoining Pluto, then there can be power in our words, but are we using that power for good? Are we using it responsibly? So all of these things are bound up in this Mercury-Pluto conjunction, that then the moon is carrying forward those overtones to this beginning of this new lunar cycle. and at the same time is feeling challenged by that Vesta in Scorpio, which Vesta can relate to our focus. Where is our focus? What is it that is really drawing our attention repeatedly? It also can relate to what we hold sacred. Okay, what lights us up, but it's in Scorpio. And so it's going to want to get to the bottom of mysteries. It's going to be concerned with the deeper and more intense feelings of humanity, which the moon can get kind of thrown off kilter by that. So this is a really interesting dynamic we've got going on here.
Well, and this new moon is in the second house of values. And so revaluation, that is a double emphasis. And I know that this is for the West Coast of the United States, and it could change for other locations. And then I would say that putting out your intentions on this new moon, since it has that trine to Jupiter and it is retrograde, that it could take a little bit of time for it to manifest. But my suggestion would be concentrate on the what, or what your intention is, and not how it's going to come to be. Because one of the rulers, Uranus, is still retrograde of that, as the modern ruler of this new moon, and Saturn is in Pisces at mid degrees, and it's gone direct not too long ago. So it's like, just focus on what you want your intention to be.
Well, it's of course timely that you mentioned Uranus, because Uranus is going to be is already slowing at this point and getting ready to station direct the next day.
Yes, and it will be sitting at that degree for several weeks for it to get moving again. So, and
Right.
we're going to come back in a few days, and we'll be doing a Uranus Stations direct show together. So our audience can always come back and watch that too for more information. So here we have a couple of grand trines. We have a water grand trine that's the dark blue, and an earth grand trine that's green. Do you want to start talking about those trines?
Well, as I mentioned, that Vesta square that I was talking about is ruled by that Mars that is retrograde, and that Mars is in the moon's home sign, and is trine Venus and Neptune and the North Node in Pisces, and then Juno in Mars's home sign of Scorpio. So that's really interesting. With Mars being retrograde, there is that, kind of maybe pulling back on some energies, going more internal, more close to home. There can be a protective side to Mars in Cancer, a bit of tribalism, a bit of, only concerning yourself with actions that are having an impact for those who are closest to you and your immediate environment. And then when you combine that with the Venus, Neptune, North Node in Pisces, along with that Juno in Scorpio, there's this real emphasis on relationships, but from that standpoint of depth and intimacy, and there's a certain amount of romanticism that we see with the Venus-Neptune combination. And then that North Node, it's the head of the dragon. So there is this sense of hunger that we can see with the North Node. How are you feeding your emotional hunger? And in particular, since it's in Pisces, that's, eldest sign, last sign of the zodiac. So it's a hunger for completion. It's a hunger for what is going to be meaningful on a deeper level. And this is a bit of the energy of a mature relationship, right? Especially with Saturn co-present. Now, I do notice it seems like Nessus is hanging out there right next to Saturn. Yes.
Yes, exact degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Partile conjunction with Nessus. And Nessus can ask us to confront some of our more abusive tendencies, the ways in which we have internalized some of the uglier patterns of human behavior. And you combine that with Saturn, that can be pretty harsh. And yet this Venus-Neptune combination is soft and romantic, and it's Venus in Pisces is in the sign of her exaltation. Okay. So this combination, I feel like there is this loving kindness and compassion that, on one hand, there's a danger that it can be taken advantage of with that Saturn Nessus combination. But on the other hand, it suggests the willingness to look at our less kindly behaviors through that lens of, rather than endlessly condemning each other for what we have done wrong and where we have internalized bad behaviors, that we instead try to find ways to heal each other,
It looks to
as
me
well
like
as healing
some
ourselves. Yeah.
work that we do on our relationships could really, if we want to improve them or have better relationships with people, we could really make those big improvements or have a deeper connection with somebody.
And when you combine that then with that Mars and that Juno relates to the promises that we make and that we keep in order to keep our relationships going, in order to make it past temporary disagreements. And, considering that on a societal level, the U.S. in particular has been experiencing lots and lots of division, but quite frankly, it's going on in lots of other countries too. There's this kind of stuff going on around the world where there's this really difficult disagreements that people are struggling with. And I'm not saying that we have to, we just have to tolerate bad behavior or whatnot, but rather that we have to be willing to look together with the people who are closest to us to be able to see how have we hurt each other, how do we continue to hurt each other, and then at the same time recognize nobody's fully innocent. Okay, we all do unpleasant things at times, and instead of just slamming the door on each other, we have to find ways to be able to see our shared humanity and then do some deep work with each other. And I don't think that this is going to automatically solve problems for everybody, but it may encourage some greater introspection with, yeah, we've got this water trine, which is emotional, but this is at this new moon in Aquarius. And so there's this combination of powerful logic with this emotional willingness to connect and do the work. That's pretty powerful. And then the other grand trine, the Earth grand trine, we're seeing Uranus in Taurus, the South Node in Virgo, and then Pallas is in Capricorn. Pluto's in Aquarius, and that Pallas and Pluto combination there, it's a similarly wide conjunction to what we're seeing with the Pluto, Mercury, and the Moon and the Sun. Yeah, that Uranus South Node and Pallas in particular, that is strategic. It's very strategic, but it's strategic on a very practical level. And at the same time, there is the potential for inspiration. There's the potential for flashes of insight. But there's the South Node in Virgo. So, Virgo is definitely a planner. Capricorn can also be very much a planner. And when the South Node is in Virgo, we may have to let go of some of our most cherished plans, and then find ways to adapt and be flexible, in ways that might be, we might be having to deal with some very sudden changes when we see Uranus. Now, it's Uranus and Taurus. Uranus and Taurus has been more seismic change rather than like things turning on a dime, but they still have been intense changes, profound changes. And Uranus is still then in this, kind of wide trine to Pluto, which is going to tighten up again when Uranus stations direct. And so this is part of that overall combination of these outer planets that are all shifting, from last November into this, I think it's July, when Uranus will change signs. Neptune's changing signs at the end of March. So there's this shift of all three outer planets at once. We are in a time of profound change on a worldwide generational level. And so this grand trine is tapping into some of that. But in particular, it is bringing that energy of, you're going to have to find ways to shift your plans and not be too tied to things being perfect.
Yes, lots of changes this year for sure. I agree with that. And, to be able to, have a plan B, or, oh, I'll go around this detour and I'll turn left here instead of I wanted to go straight. So, are you ready to go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a mystic rectangle. We have Mars is trine Juno, or sextile Juno, and then, or Pallas Athena, and then trine Uranus and sextile Mars. And then Mars is opposite Pallas and Uranus is opposite Juno. So it's all connecting. So, the sextiles and trines are a fluid movement, and then the oppositions, it's like this is my opinion, not your opinion. And it's like, if we can explain to each other and we just shift a little bit off of that, then or we get the understanding, and it's like we can see it, but there still has to be somewhat of an adjustment. Go ahead and talk about the mystic rectangle, please.
So that opposition between Uranus and Juno. I feel like that really emphasizes shifts in the social contract, and the ways in which, particularly for people in the United States, but also for people in some other countries as well, from what I'm hearing, some of the rumblings going on around the world, that there are ways in which people are feeling as though their society and their governments are not upholding their end of the deal, and that then makes people reconsider. Okay, what is my end of the deal, and why am I upholding my end of the deal if they're not upholding their end of the deal? So I think that really reflects this moment in time where there's this a lot of reconsideration of, what do our societies mean to us? What rules do we want for our societies? And and are we liking the direction that we're taking? And then you combine that with that Mars opposite Pallas. Ooh. So Mars, of course, the Mars retrograde has, encouraged people to kind of, bring their actions closer to home, more internalized. For some of us, that has corresponded to a decreased physical energy. Lots of people feeling a little exhausted by the changes that are going on around us. And then when that is opposing Pallas, Pallas is our strategic side and our wisdom and our capability to see what is the big picture and how am I working within it, and how can I respond tactically to what's going on. But when Mars is opposing Pallas, now we may be taking actions that do not actually fit good, sound, tactical thinking. Or we may have an awareness of, yeah, that's a great idea. That's the thing I should be doing, but I don't feel like it. Mars in Cancer is very much our actions being dictated by our feelings.
Exactly. And it's like maybe you feel that way now, but 3 hours later you could feel a completely different way, or 3 days later. So it's maybe if you become like, I'm going to go do this, it's like, well, maybe if you don't have to do that right that minute, you might want to breathe and wait a few hours or a few days before you take the action.
Right. And Pallas in Capricorn is pragmatic and goal-oriented, and definitely is, takes the long view of things. And so that Pallas in Capricorn is like, but I have this 5-year plan. And Mars is like, yeah, screw your plans. But because it's an opposition, planets that are in opposition have the greatest awareness of each other. Even if they have come to an impasse, they're still, they're opposite each other. They're looking right at each other. They can't ignore each other, even though they're in this kind of, what seems like this fundamental disagreement. And so those oppositions are saying, we have to try to figure out some way to be able to go forward, even though we have these two very different energies at work here. And recognize, of course, that each sign is on an axis with the opposite sign, right? They're part of a spectrum. An opposition may seem like, they're completely different and ne'er the twain shall meet, and yet they both have some element of each other within them.
And lots of times there's more similarities than differences if we can listen or learn about it.
Right. And so this mystic rectangle then is a very lovely way for us to be able to get a greater sense of where are those areas where it seems like things are opposed, but they can actually maybe get some help from other planets around them to be able to work together. So,
In that
every
Uranus,
planet in this is supported.
Uranus will go direct the next day. So that'll change the energy with Uranus. And then Mars will go direct on February 23rd. And how you'd mentioned about, not having as much energy. And I know people have been saying, well, I've been trying to get this accomplished or that accomplished. And, still work on things, but it's probably when Mars goes direct, it'll be a lot easier to move things forward, I would say.
And with Uranus going direct, we're also, we may have been in this space of like, feeling like we want to be able to change things and can't, or that there's changes going on all around us and we don't know how to adapt to the changes and take an active stance in the changes. Well, Uranus going direct, and then later when Mars goes direct, yeah, we can definitely take an active hand in the changes that are happening in our lives.
Well, that was fantastic. So, do you have any overall thing that you can tell our audience that how to work with this new moon that we haven't already talked about, or just recap maybe a few things?
Change is a coming. And I think that, if we work on some of these sort of undercurrents and internal stuff, with the current retrograde energy that we've got with Mars retrograde, that's going to help us for when we are able to take a more active stance with regard to change. Do remember, however, that this spring is some crazy astrology, and we'll be talking more about that. I know, but all three of the inner planets, all three of the personal planets, are going to be spending retrograde this spring. So I really feel like this new moon in Aquarius is asking us to put on our thinking caps about the kind of world, the kind of society that we wish to see, that we wish to live in, and then do some of the deep work regarding our own values, yes, but also how are we showing up with other people? Who are we willing to make some deeper connections with? Who are we willing to do some of the hard and uncomfortable work with? To confront the areas where we haven't previously lived up to our values, whether as individuals or as societies. It's time to do that kind of logical work while we're in this. Maybe I don't have so much of the energetic thing going on as a result of that Mars retrograde. so that when we're ready to really go forward after everything moves forward in the spring, um, we'll be in a position to be able to deal with that stuff. Doing this kind of groundwork um, logically, but also, with that kind of dialed back physical energy. This is the time to be doing that, to set those foundations. It should be remembered that Aquarius, even though, it's got that modern affinity with Uranus and change and is future oriented. Traditionally, it's ruled by Saturn. Saturn is about structure and foundations and laying groundwork. So now's the time to lay the mental groundwork and emotional groundwork, because the moon is involved, right? Um, so that when we move forward, we're moving forward in a much better position than just being reactive.
Oh, that was great. Yes, I would say breathe, be ready to pivot, make adjustments, don't panic, have compassion for yourself and others, and
Yes.
through all the changes that are coming this year. So come back and enjoy more episodes of the Astrology Star Sisters. Here's Madam Simon's information, and I'll let you talk about that.
Right. So I talk about astrology in my Patreon. I also do custom astrological art for my patrons. And so you can find me there if you are interested. I also am a consulting astrologer, just like Liz is. And if you wish to schedule a consultation with me, you can find me at iconalchemy.com.
Thank you. And I also do consultations. I have a newsletter and a YouTube channel and other podcasts that I do. I have a 2025 astrological highlight series going on. I'm going to add astrological magic, I think, in February with Robert. And Justin and I do the monthly astrology forecast and the monthly full moon forecast and a Chiron asteroid series. And the Astrology Star Sisters has a dwarf planet series, planet stationing series, decans using astrology and tarot, fixed stars, Uranian astrology, and Chinese astrology. I will be on Talk Cosmos on January 26th, also talking about the Aquarius new moon. I'm part of the archetypal symbols team, and you can tune in here on my channel and watch that live or after the fact. And again, to get a hold of Simon, it's iconalchemy.com is her website, and my website is alightpath.com. And reach out to us. We enjoy hearing from you. And I want to say thank you for all that are watching live and those that come and watch at a future time. Leave a comment, a like, ask us questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye for now.